Hello everyone, I'm Chris Hazen, and today I'm going to be presenting, you guessed it, JavaScript front-end frameworks. So let's continue on, and starting off, what are front-end frameworks? Front-end frameworks are actually bundles or collections of code that are used as like the scaffolding or the framework, as you would. As you see here, like a house is used as an example. The frame for a house, it's the foundation that you can start building your web applications on. So a lot of it's common bundles of code, and this has a lot of pros. There's some cons, but there's a lot of pros to it. And I think a lot of the examples right here I have listed, like web development, mobile apps, games, servers. There's a lot of framework that can be put in place to help kick off you're building an application. Another example I saw was it's like the skeleton. And so let's continue on, and we're going to go right into some of the common frameworks. These are the ones I saw pop up a lot during my research. Vue, which we've used in class already, React, and Angular. So these ones are very, very common front-end frameworks for web design and development. So and we'll get into a little bit more about each one here going forward. So we'll start off with Vue. This is the one we've seen in class a little bit, and it's some of the pros to Vue. And this is one I really like a lot too, because I'm new to using frameworks myself. So it's beginner friendly. I really enjoy that. There's a lot of detailed documentation about everything in Vue, and it's flexible. So you're able to use it for doing a lot of things. We saw that in class already. And it relies a lot upon HTML with JavaScript. That's like the backbone to Vue. So, and both of those are very common. So it's great. I like that. Now, an interesting fact about Vue, and I didn't realize this, it's actually very common over in China. So they use Vue a lot over there. And while that can be a great thing for developing Vue further, one of the cons is there's sometimes when you need to find help, there is going to be a language barrier in the discussions about Vue. And I mean, it's a con still, I guess, depending on how you look at it. And then also, since it's a little bit newer, it has smaller dev support. It's not as popular. And then also you run into that language barrier when you do need help every once in a while. I mean, they're not really. I mean, it is what it is for that. And then going forward, we have React. And React's interesting. It was developed by Facebook, and it's a very popular one. So it's got a large community. That's a big plus to it. And it's cross-platform, and it works very well on mobile devices. So, for example, Android and iOS, you can build an app it'll work well with both of those. Now, what I found was that the documentation for it isn't the best. It's not always the greatest. And it has this mixed template logic, and what that does is it can make it a little bit more difficult to comprehend and learn when you're trying to build a template for something and you have to deal with two different template from different languages, for example. Now, some of the most common uses for it, like I said, it's Facebook developed, and it actually is used in Netflix, it's used in PayPal and Uber. So these are all very common applications that we use all the time. I mean, I know I've used all of those. Continuing on, we are going into Angular, and some of the pros to that I noticed were a lot of people said you can really the test speeds for the testing environment of your framework is amazing. It's really fast, and it works very well with dynamic forms and user interface templates. So dynamic forms, anytime you're trying to input data or anything on let's say like a phone, a mobile device, and it's able to work well with different mobile devices to your PC, it works well with that. It creates nice frameworks for that. Now it has a multi-layer architecture, and what I found was that could be kind of make it a little more difficult to learn as well. So out of the three of these, obviously Vue's the more beginner friendly. These other two take a little bit more to know. And another issue that makes it a little bit more difficult is it uses TypeScript in some areas instead of JavaScript, and so you need some TypeScript knowledge to use it as well. And so that is just another aspect you have to know more about. It was produced and developed by Google originally. It's open source now, I believe. And so Google uses it, and in Microsoft Office. So those are some of the uses for this one. So just let's get into frameworks in general as a whole. What are some of the good things about these frameworks? Well, the productivity. So when you don't have to write all this individual code all on your own from the beginning, you can really just you can start getting things going a lot faster. You can develop things a little bit more quickly because you have this framework to build off of now. You can use this already pre-written code that has been developed and is ready for you to use to create the framework and the jumping off point as a foundation for where you want to go with your application. And so that makes it much easier when you don't have to start coding from the very beginning. You can use some of this stuff to kind of help speed things along. Now maintenance is another thing I saw that was really good about it. It's less in-house maintenance. And so the reason that is because the community is actually constantly, a lot of these are open source, so the community is constantly contributing to maintaining these frameworks. So you don't have to actually spend the money and the cost in a business, for example, to continue to maintain and develop your framework. And it's nice for everyone. And part of the community contributing also kind of ties into this next one, which is standardization. So a lot of times they follow the best practice, industry guidelines, and that's just making it so that everyone can use it, everyone can understand it. It's standard, it's the good way to go for a framework that is being used across the board, across many platforms. Let's get into some of the thumbs up there, and let's get into some of the not so good. I wouldn't say necessarily cons, but not as good. So creativity, and you could take this for what you want, but it can take away a little bit from the developer's creativity when they're using someone else's pre-written code or code that's already written and not kind of writing their own code and getting those creative juices going. How sometimes people can get into a flow and kind of they have a way they want to build something. Well, now they can use these frameworks, which is nice, but it can also take away from some of the creative sides of things. And actually, I'm going to skip down to the third point here and kind of go into that. A lot of apps are everything's got its own unique feel and unique way of being built. And with front-end frameworks, sometimes you'll run into little details that are maybe unique to each app that you run into an issue, for example, and you need to fix it. Well, the front-end framework is a pretty standard thing. So your app might have this unique problem you have to work out now. And so that's another maybe not so good thing. And then compatibility, as they update these frameworks, different versions could possibly run into issues with versions maybe not being compatible with each other and conflicting with one another. Now I'd hope with the good, maybe the maintenance side of things with the community, they'll work through that, so can hope for that. And well, that's not a good sign, but they're not necessarily cons. And with that, we'll end my presentation. So thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a good day.